Welcome to the next edition of our Saluki Online Sessions. I'm Dr. Susan Wegmann, the Executive Director of our SIU Online and Extended Campus. This particular session is focused on assessments in online courses. But before we begin, I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about what SIU Online and Extended Campus do. We support programs. We support all of the online programs across campus in recruiting, in quality in their courses, in marketing, as well as compliance. We also have an arm of several folks that work on military folks and military issues. And we also collaborate with Academic Affairs, our provost office, to develop new online programs and courses. So that's who we are. Our tagline is innovate, elevate, and serve. And these Saluki Online Sessions really try to hit at all three of those. Hopefully you'll find something innovative today. We want to elevate this importance of assessment in online learning. And of course, we want to serve our online professors and online faculty. So thank you so much for being here. And we really appreciate your attention and your engagement. What we're going to do is the next few minutes, I'll be talking away, and then we'll take questions at the end. So thank you so much for holding those. Don't forget them, though. All right, so what you see is a mess. What you see, the next few slides will be 7 ideas about online assessment. So the first one is to align assessment with learning outcomes. You may or may not know this, but our accreditors have told us that we need to more closely align all the programs across campus to student learning outcomes. So the way that it works, the hierarchy is program learning outcomes. Well, let me start even farther back than that. Our chancellor did his strategic plan, and a part of that strategic plan talks about engaging online or engaging learners. Then each college developed their outcomes based on the strategic plan, and then each program has developed program learning outcomes, which led to each course developing student learning outcomes per course. So there's been a lot of effort. You've probably been involved in some of the meetings where you've taken a look at all of the student learning outcomes and you've aligned them with your assessments in each course. So the beauty of this is our D2L system, which is our LMS here, will help us gather information, but it's only as good as what we put in. That's that old garbage in, garbage out. If we put in really good rubrics, for example, that measure those student learning outcomes, then we're going to be able to get that data back. So one of the first things I wanted to start out with is thinking about your assessments. Please align them to those learning outcomes. We also need to think about the assessment methods and making sure that we're assessing students at different levels using different formats and even in different times along the semester. So, you know, the tagline here is a variety of assessments can showcase student learning in a variety of ways. We know that our students don't come to us as cookie cutters. We know that they're going to be able to show their learning in a variety of ways. So the caveat here is, you know, if you're only using one kind of, say, objective kind of assessment, you're going to learn a very thin slice about what that student knows about your content area. If you build that out into some of the suggestions you're going to see in just a minute to performance-based assessments or authentic assessments, you're going to get a lot bigger picture of what that student actually knows about your content area. So the idea here is to diversify those assessment methods. Some of the ideas on the slide here are ways that you can assess that are not just paper, pencil. I wish we don't do that anymore. You see, I've listed quizzes and texts on the third line here, but have you ever considered using projects or simulations? Video reactions are also really interesting. You get a sense of the student's personality that way. They get a sense of your personality, and making sure that you're focused on the course content, of course, but then at the same time, you're helping the student understand, you know, what they need to be showing you by asking pointed questions about what they know. Case studies are also really appropriate in some settings and in some subject areas. And so using the case study approach, you can either provide the case study and ask questions about it and have the students answer things like, what would you have done in this situation? Or you can have the students create the cases and then ask those same questions and allow them to show their knowledge throughout the entire semester, not just at one slice at the end or middle at the end. Creative interpretations as well. This is kind of a controversial issue because sometimes the subject area doesn't lend itself to a creative interpretation. But I really want you to think about things such as I was teaching a course that we were preparing future teachers, and we were looking at training students in high school on vocabulary lessons. And so I attended a session somewhere, someplace about digital storytelling. And all of a sudden I had the thought, oh, I could have the students use digital storytelling with their future students to come up with the content and to show what they know about the content. And so using that creative interpretation, now digital storytelling has been around forever, but bringing it into this year, you might even incorporate something with AI. You might give them, the task of working with their AI partner as a collaborator, and then coming up with something really creative that interprets the knowledge and that helps you understand as a professor what your student actually knows about that particular topic. And then, as I alluded to before, performance-based assessments so that the students perform rather than tell. They can either produce a product, they can complete a process, and all of those options are available. And again, you should, I think, always ask, what can you do online that you really can't do face-to-face? So when you're teaching an online class, it's things like, what are the data sources that you can easily have your students go to online that's really hard to do when there's a face-to-face course in a face-to-face setting? So these are some of the assessment types. The next idea is to ensure question validity and reliability. And that's answering those two questions. Do the questions measure what you intend? That's validity. And can they produce consistent results over time? That's reliability. Are the questions reliable for the content that you're trying to get at? That's just basic statistical analysis at that point, but it really is an important thing to think about when you're looking at assessments and thinking about assessments. The next idea is to employ formative and summative assessments. So formative means those pieces that are along the way. So the weekly assignments, those can be called formative activities or formative assessments. The summative is typically at the very end. You may have a summative in the middle and then at the end. But the idea that I wanted to get across was you need both. And in online learning, again, there are some unique opportunities that students can use, say, a data set that they can only get online, but they can see how that data set may move and may evolve throughout the time that you have them in the class. I'm thinking of like the stock market and an idea where you follow a particular stock. Well, formatively, you can ask them questions along the way about that. Summatively, at the end, you would ask a different set of questions that would encompass a lot of content, a lot more of the content. Another idea is to clearly communicate your expectations. I would spend time, and in fact, when I was teaching, I would talk a lot about what is that particular assessment, supposed to be measuring, and why would the student take their time to even fill out the assessment? And if you give it that relative idea, then students are much more likely to engage in the process. So constantly, I think you should refer back to those course learning objectives and student learning outcomes. I would always have the syllabus pulled up the first thing of every class. The students knew I was going to go through the syllabus. Sometimes it was just to keep us on track and that we were studying the things that were on that particular calendar date. But the other reason, the bigger reason, was I want them to see it all fits together. And these assessments are clearly communicated during the course of the semester. Don't, I don't know about you, but I've had faculty members who would kind of hide the real requirements until a particular time. That is, I don't think, very effective. And I think it really sets up the, I'm going to get you kind of attitude. Also making sure that your assessment expectations are clear. That's really hard to do sometimes. So you might have someone that is not in your content area. Take a look at that the way that you set it up, and ask them some questions about it. What would you expect to find from this? I would certainly also recommend copying and pasting that activity that you're wanting your students to do into ChatGPT or some other Copilot or some other AI, and ask it the questions. How can we strengthen this? How can I make this more clear? And what would you expect if this were the assignment? And so if it gives you back a list of things you weren't expecting, then you know, yeah, you probably need to clarify at some point. It might be that you just need to give an example or those kind of things, but the clarity is really important at that point for assessments. And then I wanted to take a minute to talk about technology and using technology effectively. You have a plethora of digital tools. In fact, I highly recommend you going to the CTE website, the Center for Teaching Excellence website has at the very bottom of their first page a list of all of the tools that are available to you. And there are things like Turnitin, which is a plagiarism detection. There are things like this Respondus. You could use LinkedIn Learning for some points. And those tools you can embed into your D2L assignments, whether it be by a link or whether it's an actual embedding into the course. I think that's really, really important. And then the idea, I've had some faculty members talk to me about using LinkedIn Learning. You can curate modules of LinkedIn Learning courses and have your students go through the modules, and they're good depending on which one you look at. So the caveat there is you take it first. You go through all of the LinkedIn that you're asking your students to do, and then you can rely on whether you think it's a good fit or not for your class. But you can curate particular modules, and then you can come up with something that's really relatable to your class. They also frequently embed quizzes, and they're very short, usually objective, but they're formative. So they're all along the way, and then sometimes there's a final at the end. So you can pretty well understand what your students know by the end of that activity. I mentioned the CTE, and these are two particular sources. In fact, one, we're having a Respondus training. There was one on March 12th, there's a couple days ago, but there's also one coming up on April 22nd. So I recommend doing that. And then LinkedIn Learning, they're having another one next week on March 26th. So those are two really good opportunities that the CTE has provided for us for assessment. Respondus is a browser. The students have to download is actually a piece of the browser. So it latches onto their browser, and it only allows them to do certain things while they're taking a particular test. Now, there are strengths and weaknesses to it. Some faculty really love it, use it all the time. Other faculty really don't because of the content of the course. So you have to go into it knowing what it can and can't do. But in general, it's a really good way to at least give you that first level of security for your exams and quizzes and things like that. Another idea to consider when you're talking about assessment is AI. And a recommendation here is to clarify the use of AI in your courses. So ask yourself, how do you want your students to use it? And then how can you help with some of the issues that you might have had already using the AI? Some faculty members are choosing to kind of put their head in the sand and choose that it's not going to be a part of their courses at all, and that's an academic freedom question or decision that they just make. Others are trying to embrace it and trying to use it to some extent, and that kind of middle area where you don't want the student to use it for the full assignment, but you want them to use it for certain parts is really where you need to be clear. And again, helping them ameliorate the issues such as if you use an AI like Notebook LMS or Notebook LM, I think is what it's called, and that's a really interesting one that you curate the sources that the AI is going to choose from to answer the questions and to be that collaborator with the student. All plagiarism detectors, plagiarism detectors are not foolproof. Again, I mentioned, in fact, even tomorrow, there is an AI detection with copy leaks. We have copy leaks available to you. The AI continues to get better and better, so it's kind of, upping the game. It seems like every time something like copy leaks or these companies do a better job with AI detection, then the AI becomes better at avoiding that detection. So again, all of those caveats, but there are some really good tools that we can use. And I wanted to share with you some prompts if my PowerPoint will work. Okay, here are a number of prompts. I think there's 9 of them in total. If you are looking at some adaptive learning assessments, you can have your students use these prompts to help them for future assessments. So the student would then feed in whatever AI you choose. Based on my previous quiz responses, generate a set of progressively challenging questions on whatever topic, provide the hints and explanations after each response to help me improve. So this is using it as an adaptive learning device. You could also use it as peer assessment. Help me critically evaluate my peer assessment, my peers' assignment on whatever topic, provide a structured feedback piece, and then include the strengths and areas for improvement. So this would be an assignment where you have students look at each other's discussion board prompts, or you have them look at each other's work. Well, the student then takes it, feeds it into the AI, gives it this particular prompt, and then not only is it giving back those strengths and weaknesses and all that, it's giving back information that the student may not have thought about to begin with. So it's all of that learning process. It's kind of like they're immersed in that content area and in that world. You can also ask for automated formative feedback. Here's my response to an assignment on blank. Here's my draft response. Analyze my answer for, and then you can tell it whatever you want, for clarity, coherence, accuracy, and then provide suggestions to improve my argument and reasoning. On this one, I probably would ask, as the professor, I would ask that students submit what the AI said, so that then at the end of the semester, you can compare and you can see that it's not probably exactly what the AI said, but that the student had time to fix what the AI said and recommended. These are all, as I'm talking about each one, I'm thinking, oh, there's 49 reasons why that wouldn't work, but there's a lot of good reasons why these would work. So I do understand the caveat there. You have to use them with thought and with decision making there. If you're having them analyze discussion posts, I mentioned this one before, but analyze my contributions in an online discussion about blank. Do I demonstrate higher order thinking, such as analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and then suggest ways I can deepen my engagement? So before the student responds to that discussion board prompt, they put it into the AI with this prompt. Intelligent tutoring, teach me blank as if I were a beginner. Start with foundational concepts, quiz me at each stage, make sure I understand basically, and ask questions. And then adjust the difficulty based on my responses. So this is a really fascinating use of AI and one that I think we're going to be using even more. AI-assisted project-based assessments takes that even further by saying, I'm working on a project about blank. Help me outline the key milestones, what I need to do at certain stages, identify potential challenges, suggest relevant resources. So this, you can tell they haven't done the assignment yet. They're really just getting started. And the AI is pretty good. They will direct, ChatGPT and Copilot, the two that I use the most, will redirect the student to go right to sources like Google Scholar. They, in fact, chastised me. It's been about a year ago, but it was funny. I was trying to fill out a chapter and looking for some resources on a particular topic, micro-credentialing. And it was quite funny. I gave it all the stuff that I wanted, and back came this pre-programmed response, I'm sure, that said, basically, you need to do it yourself. So in a way, it made me mad. But then the other way, I thought, oh, well, that's good. Somebody's really thought about those responses and how this kind of thing that I was asking them to do is really something that the author needs to do on their own. I did work around it, by the way, and get my own responses to that same prompt. Here are the last 3 suggestions I had. Predictive analysis for early intervention. So this one, the student has taken several quizzes and assignments, and you dump them into that AI, and you ask the AI to predict potential areas where they might struggle, and then suggest some study strategies to improve. Essay scoring, obviously the same idea. You can feed it the actual draft of the work, and then you can feed it the rubric, and then you can ask it to do these things, evaluate it for argument strength, coherence, grammar, and use of evidence, and so on. And then the last one here, the AI-driven simulation assessments create a real-world simulation where I have to apply my knowledge to solve a complex problem, include different scenarios and decision-making paths with AI-generated feedback on my choices. It's important that you understand you're seeing the AI as a collaborator, and I think our students need to see them as collaborators, not the enemy, but certainly not the one to do their work. And then a bonus, provide timely feedback. And I can't say this enough. I've heard several pieces of feedback from online students who say, I haven't had anything graded for months. I have no idea how I'm doing in this class. I mean, I think even the professors doing that know that that's not exactly optimal. That's not really engaging. And so providing timely feedback allows the students to see that you really care. You're interested in their learning, and that is not just busy work just to check off the box. It's going to help them later. So that's all of the issues that I had for today, and those 7 ideas plus our bonus. I did want to say that our next in the series is the optimal practices for online learning. As you get ready for the next semester, you may want to think about some of these practices. We have some partnering with our CTE instructional designers on that one. So I'm excited to share with you that one. So